What job do you have insane respect for, but you'd never personally do? A guy one road over from us owns his own septic tank service. His truck is built on an 80s F-250 diesel, low overhead. He works for himself and has two helpers. He came out to help us a few years back. While his two guys were digging up my septic tank, we got to talking about cars. He pulled out his phone and started swiping. After about the sixth car, I said, maybe I need to change careers. I've been in engineering for 20 years and I get crap dumped on me all the time. Who knew it would be more lucrative to pump said crap instead of sift through it? Alright, so he's living proof that sometimes the most down to earth jobs can have surprisingly high liquid assets. Yes, pun intended. Story 2. I myself do the 911s. It's really not so bad so long as you can compartmentalize. It seems like the second I get home, I can barely remember the events from the day. Then 2 days later, I'll be like, oh yeah, that happened. The only thing that I have problems with now is anything to do with kids. Ever since I've had kids of my own, I get a little squeamish. Like one time, I took a call from some person claiming to be a little girl and that her mommy wasn't breathing. Took responders like 15 minutes to find the house, and I was on the line the whole time with her. Come to find out, the caller was actually just some person who's been calling in swatting stuff. That messed me up for a bit. Other than that, it's a pretty good job, especially if you're working towards something else, like if you're going to school or something. It's nice to have the downtime to work on it. You also meet some pretty cool people. Firefighters are usually pretty cool, and same with some of the officers and EMS crews. Also, where I'm at, the pay and benefits are lit. Story 3. A nurse who looked after my dad when he was in his final days was an absolute angel, and I'll never forget her. Her name was Katie. She stayed behind after her shift to hold our hands and let us lean on her. She was just pure kindness. We were called back to the hospital when things changed quickly and she came back. She took me by the shoulders and said gently but directly, he is passing away. It will be tonight. Now is the time to say what you need to say. You tell him often, tell him again. And gave me the biggest hug. I needed her to be direct because she clearly knew we had minutes rather than hours, and she wanted us to be able to hold it together enough to tell him how much we loved him. There wasn't time to cry or fall apart, and she recognized that. And we did say our goodbyes. I got to thank him for being the best dad in the world, and I'm always going to be grateful for that. It must be a terribly hard job, but rewarding to know you have made such an impact on people's lives that they will never forget. Story 4. Teacher/instructor of any sort. It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, I genuinely feel teachers have a calling to it and have the patience of saints but are drastically underpaid, undersupported, persecuted by the public for things they don't understand, here in the USA anyway, and I fear for their safety. The other side of it is all me. I've worked with young children in a college work-study program, and it is definitely not for me. I also hate speaking in front of groups, even small crowds. I am far better as support staff or one-on-one instruction than I ever would be in a classroom. I'm glad and grateful to those that can do it. I simply could not. I ended up going into allied health, doing work for patients behind the scenes. Story 5. I worked in a shelter for years. It was horrible, but also the best job I've ever had. I loved and hated it. I worked in the clinic, so I rarely handled healthy animals aside from their intake. We took care of the sick and dying animals daily. Oftentimes they made it, oftentimes they didn't. It was so hard. I remember once we had a kitten named Spooky. It was near Halloween. He was only there for a day or two. I wasn't really attached to him, but he had to be terminated and I just lost it, just ugly sobbing. I had animals I cared for much more, terminated, and I didn't cry, but I think I was just crying for all of them. Mauve was a kitten who crashed. I spent all day bringing her back and checking on her. She was doing so well by the end of the day. I didn't work the next day and came back the following day, so excited to see her. I asked if she had been cleared and moved out of critical care. My best friend had to look at me and tell me she passed away. Picasso was a dog who came in from a horrible situation. He was big and aggressive and liked very few people. He loved me. He loved me so much. He'd lay on my lap like a baby, this big 100-pound dog. I loved him. But he bit people. He wasn't safe. I still have his ashes. I need to buy a nicer urn. Leo was a kitten I also wasn't particularly attached to, but came in one morning and he was just gone. I tried to put on a brave face for my coworker. She was new and this happened, and she had to get used to the fact that this happened and will happen again, but I just wanted to sob. And to the dog who bit me, I'm sorry you were abandoned. I'm sorry you were so failed by humans. I'm sorry you trusted me so much. Maybe I trusted you too much. I'm sorry we stopped by the door to snuggle. I'm sorry the door opened and spooked you. And I'm sorry your first instinct was to bite the closest thing to you. You didn't mean it. You were so scared and apologetic after, but that was enough to seal your fate. There's happy stories too. I love those, but sometimes I want to tell the sad ones. They deserve to have their stories told too. Story 6. Plumbing. There's places that still don't have access to clean water sources, but we're spending millions for fiber optics. Make the media free. Meanwhile, outdated plumbing and septic can end you and you have to pay for water. Water is a huge key to life, so props and thanks to those in the industry. Sadly, most of the plumbing companies or water companies can't afford the millions it would take for updating our water sources for our health, and the world/government is more worried about investing in technology instead. Story 7. I'm a paramedic and I have incredible respect for our nurses who are the workhorses of healthcare. Special shout out to Emerge, PAIDS, IND, NICU, ICU, psych, trauma, hospice, and home care. The collective knowledge and skills of nurses is astronomical. If you follow a nurse on shift in a busy ER, they sacrifice meal times and washroom breaks, are on their feet all shift, running from task to task, prioritizing a dynamic patient load. They deal with emotional situations, face violence, and have frustrations taken out on them, do tasks that most people are not willing or able to do. And our police officers, who are the only people out there keeping me safe while I do my job, every day they go to work could be their last. In this world with all the hate, the vast majority are good and honest but get painted with the same brush as the few who are not. I couldn't take the criticism and judgment and still lay my life down for those very haters. Not to mention the detectives working behind the scenes to investigate crimes. No one even gives these folks a second thought and don't realize the work put in to protect the public or bring safety and justice to victims. That's a lot of heavy stuff to be involved with, the emotionality around interfacing with the victims, the frustration of dealing with an ever more difficult to navigate justice system. Just not easy. I'm not resilient enough to do any of these jobs. They are special people indeed and do so much good with so little recognition. Story 8. I know I'm late to the party, but an oncologist was in med school with the intention of going into onc because my dad passed away from cancer. Found out very quickly 2 things. First, I do not have what it takes to interface with patients at such a critical level. I suffered from insomnia in med school just because of a diagnosis for T1DM for a young patient during a health disparities clinic. Would go on with sadder experiences, and I knew I needed to rethink how I could make an impact in medicine. Second, I do not want to give up part of my compassion for patients in order to successfully be an oncologist for my entire career. I'm not saying all oncologists are like this, but I have witnessed a great many who do when I'd sit down with them and talk about the current treatment landscape. Patients would probably be appalled if they heard their onc speak the way they do, but they have to find ways to cope too. Switch to a PhD, work now in oncology as a clinical scientist, and go to the wall every day to find better, safer treatments for cancer patients. I've coined it as my, quote, arm's distance approach to still participate in the medical field. Story 9. Teaching elementary/middle school/high school. So many teachers work their backs off for garbage pay, only to get crapped on by the districts they work for and some of the parents. Too often I see people post on social media that teachers only work 9 months a year, they get paid too much, they only have one job. They deal with all of that in addition to constantly changing teaching and testing standards while also spending their own money to supply their classrooms with supplies. But they keep on keeping on because they love the children and can't see themselves doing anything else. Story 10. Everyone is saying medical care, but what about those who provide you with food, sell you food? Those people who are working at stores had to deal with so much crap too. They were never appreciated for what they were doing. During the lockdown, no one noticed them. They were in danger too. They didn't even know if someone had the disease or not. Not like your all-praised medical workers who got good quality masks and everything to protect them. I work as a student in a store, and let me tell you, it sucks. Never do it like a real job. You have to do a lot of physical work and at the same time put up with dumb people or people who just don't respect you because, quote, you are just a store worker. Yeah? Guess what, Witch? If my mom doesn't bring out your freaking potato chip from the storage beside other heavy craps who you can cry rivers. Story 11. Street working. It is the oldest profession and the most honorable, but I could easily do it. But with women, though, not men, male street workers don't have as many possibilities to choose only to be with the opposite gender. At least you know what they will cost you up front instead of the unknown amount you will likely be mistreated through the court system in a divorce later. And over 50% of marriages end in divorce, and the ones who stay mostly do so for practical reasons as emotional love fades and mature people in age often don't mature emotionally to find other ways to love in old age. Some do, but most do not find this balance all their life. Honestly, if money weren't an issue, I could see myself settling down with a street worker. They are high quality, classy gals who know how to give a man what he needs in an arrangement with honesty and monetary agreement up front. These are smart ladies who know how to survive in this vile world, face the day with courage, and face dangers every day. They have no lies about love when love is really just a choice, not feelings. Are there any street workers out there about 45 years or older who want to retire and just take care of one John for the rest of their life? I don't have lots of money, but you can retire with me in modest means and a less risky lifestyle. Story 12. Not even sure if it's a job anymore, but a block layer. I'm not connected to the construction industry anymore, but I think it's all poured concrete walls now. Anyway, my dad didn't have enough work to keep me busy one summer, either in late high school or early college, and let me to his block layer buddy for a couple of weeks. I mixed mud for them and carried 5-gallon buckets of it to them on the walls all day long. I wasn't what I thought was peak shape at the time, but I never worked that hard before or since. For those 2 weeks, if I wasn't eating or working, I was asleep from exhaustion. That was one brutal job. Luckily, the crew were all extremely nice and friendly, so it wasn't an absolutely miserable experience, just the most physically demanding one I've ever had. I couldn't imagine choosing to do that year after year. Story 13. The police officers who have to watch hours upon hours of materials in order to connect what they see in the photos, videos, and audio to actual suspects to get evidence and arrest kitty fiddlers. I cannot imagine to fathom the amount of trauma a job like that has upon an individual. It's a job that needs to be done by somebody for the greater good, but it's a job that's truly so horrifying that it will never leave somebody the same. I never want to end up in that kind of job. Respect to the people who are brave enough to do it for the sake of helping. Story 14. Deep sea divers. Screw the sea. It's a salty soup of cold doom in a submarine. You're in danger on the biggest boat. You aren't totally safe. Now imagine having nothing but a suit and an active oxygen timer, and the deeper you go, the longer it takes for you to surface. And also, there are about 100 things that can go wrong at any moment, which will end up in your doom. Story 15. Forensic investigators, the people who have to go to the crime scenes and look up everything to determine the cause of such crime. I saw another Ask Reddit question that asked, what was the case that made you quit being an investigator? The very first story made me immediately back out and keep scrolling. I can't imagine the worst investigators have seen. I kind of don't want to imagine it. Story 16. I worked with crime scene cleanup and didn't last as long as I thought I would. It's seriously a difficult job, just physically wise, but the mental aspect is an entirely different thing we had to deal with. We would make small jokes like, you think their ghost is watching us, laughing, to lighten the mood because, damn. Seeing someone's house in their last fleeting moments was daunting. Seeing the area right before tragedy occurred is really eye-opening to how quick passing away can happen. Story 17. Aircraft mechanic. As a person who was starting mechanical work, being an aircraft mechanic has higher stakes than a vehicle mechanic. They are more strict about getting the job done right and not rushing it. I won't do it regardless of the money they give me because you are liable for the lives of 250 people when you are working on airplanes compared to cars. You have to do inventory checks, meaning if your 10mm socket is lost, it is a big deal, and you'll have to look for it even if it means taking everything and redoing it. And once there is an economic downturn or an event that will scare passengers, you don't have a job and you get laid off. Story 18. Anyone who works in serious cases for child social services. I used to be a designated safeguarding officer for an education company, so I would have staff teaching around 1,000 kids, and they would bring any safeguarding concerns to me. It was then my job to assess whether it was a significant enough concern to pass on to social services. This usually involved me also being the first contact with parents, which is all around pretty crap. It's not nice having to tell any parent you've had to report a concern to social services and then question them on it. Although you had a certain level of responsibility to judge correctly, not everyone was passed on, but all were recorded and kept. You did have mostly the get-out-of-jail card of being able to ring social services for advice, which would cover you legally. Although consciously I didn't always agree with their advice and had to challenge them. The odd case I had was horrific, and I still think about it years later. That part of my job took about maybe 5 hours a week and was mostly just kids who had said something inappropriate. I'd hate to think what effect it must have on you to do that 37 hours a week where you're only getting the serious cases come through, too. Must ruin your outlook on life completely and yet is such an important job. Story 19. Cave diving or underwater welding like on big oil rigs. Now, I don't mind swimming pools too much, but holy heck does deep water, especially with massive structures, scare the crap out of me. And cave diving is even worse. I don't mind caves on their own, but being in the water would somehow make me super claustrophobic. The top posts on r/submechanophobia subreddit are just the freaking worst nightmare fuel. Thank you so much to the heroes of our infrastructure who keep our oil rigs intact, and the heroes that rescue people from flooded caves so that I never ever freaking ever have to do either of those things. Story 20. Pet groomers or hairdressers have tough jobs. I hear a lot about dogs coming in matted and owners insisting it's not matting. They'll say things like, the breeder said it's a low maintenance breed so it doesn't need brushing, and clearly won't change their ways. I can't imagine seeing a dog that's so matted it ends up with a mess simply because the fur couldn't hold anymore, or flea infestations, or long nails that disrupt walking or pierce the paw pads. And then to have to give the dog back? I'm sure at some point they can call animal control, but that seems to fail a lot because, quote, they're getting them groomed. And then hairdressers. So many people have lice and insist they don't, or have matting so old that it's literally growing mold. I think what I'd hate the most would be seeing a child's neglected hair. It's got to be such an irritating job to have. Story 21. Not very relevant in my country as we haven't been to war in a couple hundred years, but soldiers. The fact that you are willing to pass away for your country is completely beyond me, as a country won't even remember your name and you'll just be part of the men who passed away for a country later on. I have huge respect for their courage and strength, but I would never do that to myself. There are things I'd go out for, but not political leaders. Two old, bitter men bickering for power shouldn't result in thousands of young men passing away before things get resolved. Screw war and every single leader willing to send their people towards certain doom while they sit in their safe, comfy homes. But huge respect towards the soldiers fighting for what they believe in and value. Story 22. Veterinary medicine or anything in general with animals is a tough field. I worked for 2 years as a veterinary assistant, and animal medicine is one of the most underpaid fields, as well as being one of the least ethnically diverse fields in the USA. Especially veterinary technicians, they're essentially like nurses for animals but get paid way less. And then there are so many states that don't require licensure to call yourself a veterinary technician, which brings down the value of what these incredible people do. And for people who work with animals in general, you have to deal with the danger that animal poses. I don't care what anyone says, no matter how nice or sweet your animal is, they can and will bite when threatened. Not to mention the strain on your body of lifting 80 plus pounds of squirming dogs that are also trying to bite you while you're avoiding getting whizzed on, or trying to restrain a fractious feline that's trying to claw at your face. Then add on top of that client education is a whole other battle. People will fight you over giving their pet things like heartworm and flea and tick prevention. I know not all places have high heartworm and flea and tick issues, but where I'm from, we do. We're just trying to keep your dog from getting heartworm, sorry. I could go on and on about knowing multiple animal body systems, the lack of available education for veterinary personnel, the complexity of the job, reading and analyzing labs, euthanasia, etc. But yeah, respect your vet professionals, people. They do so much more than you think to keep animals happy and healthy. Story 23. Police, at least the ones who join to make their communities safer and better, people who join without the intent of using their power to enact their own brand of how they feel the law should work. Even the good police officers are at the end of the crapstick because they can't just magically make the higher-ups take the incident seriously and lose their jobs if they speak out. It's a lose-lose situation for the good people and a win-win for the bad. They just get shuffled around or put on paid leave. It's a necessary job, but there's so much room for corruption and not enough oversight to be able to concretely put faith in them. And for that, I'd say it must be pretty tough being a good cop. And if you're enjoying the video so far, agreeing with one or more of these stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 24. I work for a very large company that everyone's heard of. My team is responsible for buying millions of dollars worth of injection mold tooling, and we get the final say on contract manufacturers who could see tens of millions of dollars in business from us, perhaps even more. Needless to say, when we go on site visits to meet project managers and evaluate their facilities and capabilities, they treat us well. We always eat at the most expensive steakhouses, get tickets to sports events or shows that happen to be in town. Accommodations are top-notch as well, currently staying in a hotel in Chicago that cost over $800 a night. We flew business class, and last night I had a steak at Gibson's. I think our bill was over $2,000. All the pomp and circumstance never sways me, though. In fact, the harder they try, the more I start to question their capabilities. We have usually made up our mind before coming on a trip, and this is just a trust but verify exercise, as my boss puts it. Story 25. I used to get paid to hack into companies' networks. For the longest time, it was my I can't believe I got to do this legally and get paid stupid amounts of money for it. Then it just started making me mad when I realized all the companies' network security sucks. Many were hiring me for a compliance checkbox, and when I'd come back the following year, they hadn't done anything. In some cases, not even changing the dang passwords I used from the year prior. I now maintain a large list of companies I will never do business with using any type of credit card because I'm 110% positive it will be compromised if it hasn't been already. So it's like being a professional house inspector and realizing 90% of the houses are held together with duct tape and wishful thinking. Story 26. I was a photojournalist, getting paid to sit on the sidelines of major sporting matches, at the sound desk or in the pit of bands from AC/DC to ZZ Top, meet all sorts of interesting people and create a photo to help tell their story. I photographed John Cleese during a sound check. He went on a 20-minute rant about photographers. I'd asked him to stop as I was laughing so hard I couldn't take pictures. Met Jackie Stewart and heard him speak about his time as a Formula One driver. It was an amazing job and one I was lucky to do for as long as I did. Some days I would think some people would pay to be able to do this. There were crap days too, sitting in the hot sun at an investigation site all day, watching police bag evidence sucks, as does attending car crashes in the middle of the night in the rain. But I remember the good days better than the bad ones. Story 27. I used to make video content for social media to drive ticket sales for a major arts festival. I would go to the tech rehearsal for major operas, plays, ballet, etc. There would be the full cast and orchestra performing as if they were playing to a full house, but it was just me and my camera. I could move around to get the right shot. I could go backstage and interview the performers and whoever else was in my brief to talk to. I got to tour around with an opera once. I have no background in this. I'm completely self-taught and had only done really pedestrian jobs before this. It was amazing. I never would have wanted to go to an opera or ballet before this came along. If you ever have the chance to see something like this, go. It's not as boring as you think it will be. Story 28. I'm the only other office employee except my boss. He isn't very tech smart, but tried starting a YouTube channel around his niche hobby, also his job. He also decided to get a 3D printer to manufacture one of his products in-house, small, non-structural piece of plastic. So I occasionally get paid to play with a 3D printer, goof off on Reddit and YouTube, and I also get free reign to use his Adobe Creative account for personal use. I just wish his YouTube channel took off a bit more as it seems like he's given up on it. He's got over 100 subs in under 3 months, so to someone who's been watching YouTube since 2008, I was extremely surprised. He expected to be close to 1 mil and getting sponsored by now, though, so I guess I'm not too surprised that he's not too into it. Well, bless his heart thinking 100 subs in 3 months is a failure. Meanwhile, there are channels out there celebrating hitting double digits after a year. Story 29. Mine are all pretty minor, but this is my favorite. Marketing has Macs. There's a recall on a battery for the MacBook one guy has. In theory, I could have mailed it straight to Apple and they would mail it back, but instead I drove 30 minutes south to a computer store that would mail it for me. I ate Mexican food, I drove back, and then a week or so later, I drove down and picked it up. I did not eat Mexican food because the call came in late Friday and I had already eaten. I got paid 2 hours plus mileage plus 1 lunch to deliver someone's MacBook to a store because they're too busy and important to do it themselves, and I am perfectly okay with that. Story 30. I am a professional body paint artist. Probably the best time was when I was being paid a large sum of money to paint 6 beautiful models with angel and devil designs. I mentioned to our casino client that if they could get the girls a snack before their dance performance, that it would probably help energize them. 10 minutes later, a fully loaded deluxe dessert cart arrived, so I was basically in a small room with 6 beautiful dancers enjoying all sorts of chocolatey goodness, and all of us with big grins on our faces. Found a video from the event. It's not exactly graphic, but probably best to not watch it at work or jealous significant others. The dessert part is shown a bit in the first 30 seconds. Story 31. Astronomer here. Back in June, I got to what I jokingly referred to as my first NASA mission. Specifically, I got to fly on Sophia, which is an old Boeing 747 that has a giant infrared telescope in the back of it and flies around taking observations that are better than any of you can get from the ground due to the lack of water vapor at 40,000 feet. A satellite would obviously be even better, but it's of course far cheaper to just fly around, even though they estimate it's $1 million per flight to run Sophia. Now, Sophia is a pretty incredible instrument. They literally cut a hole in the side of a 747 and fly around on trajectories planned to the minute, as a plane is used to track objects in the sky. What's more, you have 24 dedicated people devoted to making this telescope work between operating it and flying it. Also, super nice, the pilot let me sit in the jump seat for takeoff in a friggin' Boeing 747. And even more crazy, in winter for 2 months, they fly out of the Antarctic Center in Christchurch, New Zealand, to observe those southern skies. So our path that night took us far enough south that not only did we see incredible southern lights, we crossed the Antarctic Circle and saw islands considered part of Antarctica. So I can say I have seen Antarctica. All of this, by the way, was not for my research, but for a paid piece I'm writing for the Scientific American. Infrared wavelengths where Sophia works are best for studying dust, which is important but has little to do with my regular research. It blows my mind that this was all actually part of a job, and it's an experience I'm going to treasure forever. Story 32. I am the quote-unquote marketing director for a Chinese dumpling shop in the Southeast USA, which is really a pretentious way of saying that I am a liaison between an adorable, kind-hearted, tiny Chinese lady that works 70 hours a week making handmade food and the American internet. She handles most of our advertising efforts in Mandarin. She handles Chinese apps and marketing services. Our Yelp and Google rating places us among the best restaurants in our area. Bloggers and food writers reach out to us on a regular basis. To be fair, more of a reflection of her work than mine, and there's enough trust built that I can essentially do whatever I feel like to advance her goals without her caring to know many details. Part of the advertising budget I created for her includes creating content. I posted a few topical memes on our Instagram story and got a noticeable boost in followers. One late night when I couldn't sleep, I cranked out a stank of dank dumpling memes at my usual hourly rate. Honestly, most aren't fit for public consumption, but there have been a few that made the cut and get posted on our social media outlets, usually accompanied by some favorable metrics. So I get paid to make memes, my employer gets a good ROI, and the whole thing feels extremely wholesome. Story 33. Freelance videographer. I charge a fair amount for my time and I do a bit of travel. I get a call from a client I've done some previous work for that represents grass growers and entrepreneurs in a particularly red state. He asked me if I can be at this one location from 1 to 5 on a Tuesday afternoon. No idea what I'm supposed to cover or what this location is, as he simply told me a time and a place. No problem, it just looks like it's a warehouse and some offices. The location is like 2 hours away from me, so I charge travel rates, which are like 25 cents a mile on top of my normal rate. I get there and realize just by the smell and extensive security that it's clearly a growing facility for grass. And sure enough, it turns out to be the largest facility in the state. I had no idea. I get there and the client isn't ready for me, but they offer for me to take a tour with them. Video and photography isn't allowed, so it's literally just a tour of the facility for almost an hour. And I've never seen so much grass in my life, and the vast engineering that went into that place was so amazing. We finally got to work, and essentially all they needed me for was to record a conference call so they can have that as video proof of what they discussed. Literally, like 20 minutes of work that could have been done on an iPhone, but I'm not complaining because we had previously agreed on the rate, so they paid me what we agreed upon. On top of that, they gave me a free hat with the facility's logo on it, so essentially I got paid a half-day rate for 20 minutes of work, a free tour, and a hat. That was a nice day. Hold on, wait a minute. That's all you got? I have a feeling there's a few missing things in this story. Story 34. This will probably get buried, but I gotta share. I used to work as a personal assistant for a singer who fronted a band that was popular in the 80s. She now makes a living doing reunion shows, lots of them, in which she's the only original member, so yeah, not really a reunion. Her guitarist was hot like crazy, super hot, always had a crush on him, but never thought he'd want anything to do with the likes of Lil Ol' Me. It was the hot guitarist's birthday, and they had a show that night, and the boss wanted to surprise him on stage at the end of their set. She asked me to wear my sexiest outfit and walk on stage with a cake. Then she says, if you're not comfortable with this, you can say no, but I think it would be awesome if you grabbed his collar and just planted one on him. I definitely didn't say no. So the moment comes, I go up there, we sing happy birthday, I hand the cake to my boss and proceeds to make out with a hot guitarist in front of a ton of people. Definitely the best thing I've ever been paid to do. Story 35. My last job was a support worker working with adults that have intellectual disabilities. During my shifts, I would go swimming. I went to a local water slide park. I went to the movies. I went to museums. I spent afternoons outside walking through parks or just down the streets. We had bonfires and roasted s'mores in the autumn evenings. Once in a while, we would go out for lunch or dinner to a restaurant. I would eat what we cooked for the guys in the home, so free meals on shift. Everyone in the house was an amazing cook too. One guy was a cook at a local restaurant part-time and prepared some dishes. Everyone loved working with him, so he would cook. Everything was free for me. I never got paid to get into these places. I had a budget that covered my meals when we went out. I ate for free while working. It was a crappy, very hard job sometimes, but it had some crazy good benefits to being there. I miss floating on my back in a pool in the summer laughing because I was getting paid. Story 36. I used to work part-time for the Parks and Recreation Department for the state I lived in. My job title was Off-Highway Vehicle Safety Trainer. This job entailed training people in riding safety for ATVs and motorbikes, and in the winter I taught avalanche awareness and safety to snowmobilers. The state provided me with the ATV, the motorbike, and the snowmobile to use while doing the training. They also provided me with a pickup and 4-place enclosed snowmobile trailer to take said vehicles to the training. So here's the deal. The state paid me and gave me all the equipment to go out and ride every week pretty much year-round. Best job ever. If it was full-time, I never would have quit, but I had a full-time job as well as this job, so something had to give after 3 years. I had a bit of sad farewell to my Polaris and Yamaha. Story 37. Worked at a grocery store as a teenager and college student. Manager said the company's store brand of pizza wanted to take stock photos of people eating it. Myself and a few work friends volunteered. They came in with some pizzas, cooked them, and told us we could try them while they set up their equipment. Something was wrong with their stuff and they couldn't take any photos. They encouraged us to eat the pizzas while we waited. 2 hours later, they never got their stuff working and gave up. Friends and I sat around eating pizza and chatting for 2 hours. Story 38. I used to work as an aircraft handler at an airport that hosted the planes for an air show. The week leading up to the shows were awesome as civilian and military acts were constantly taking off and landing. I did a lot of the refueling, so I got to actually touch and work with the crews flying these beasts. One year on media day, I was walking through the lobby of our company's hangar and one of the pilots of an airshow team waves me over. I've been helping this team with their plane, so he knew who I was. He mentioned to me that one of the reporters that were going to fly along had to back out, and there's an empty seat available. I found my supervisor and he gave me permission to go for a ride during the middle of my shift. I got to go on a half-hour flight of 6 practice runs in the backseat of a Cold War-era military trainer and never had to clock out. Story 39. I was once hired to be the head coffee roaster, beverage designer, and barista trainer for a cafe and restaurant that was opening. But the dum-dums with the money hired me way too early, 8 months before construction was even completed. So I developed their signature roast, designed the drink menu, and then mostly sat in the roasting space and played on Reddit 40 hours a week. I begged them for work, but they were such nitpicking micromanagers that they almost always just completed my tasks for me. After 6 months, I was too bored and lonely sitting by myself, not to mention it was obvious that these intellectual giants were going to fail massively if they couldn't trust their managers to make any decisions or complete basic tasks. Ironically, they always stumbled into my findings and decisions and triumphantly held them up as their own brilliant ideas. So I left. I begged my old job back at a $15,000 a year pay cut, and I'm back to loving what I do. A year later, they filed for bankruptcy after multiple 100% employee turnovers, and the restaurant was closed a few months later. I will never forget that the most I've ever been paid was for sitting on my bum accumulating fake internet points. Oh, and at my current job, I got to dump 2 full magazines through. Story 40. I sell cars. I had a customer come in and look at a few vehicles and said he would call me that evening with his decision. He called me at around 5 p.m. saying he wanted one of the vehicles he looked at. He asked me if I could have all of his paperwork delivered to him before we closed. I said sure, so I drove the vehicle to him with the paperwork at around 7 p.m. On my drive to his home, he texted me asking, "Do you like melons?" I responded, "Of course." He then texted me a new address. It ended up being a trashy club. I walked in and saw him in the VIP section in the corner with his arms around 2 dancers. He waved me over to his section and asked me to take a seat. I handed him the folder with the documents he needed to sign. He signed everything without even reading the documents. He then handed one of the dancers a small stack of bills. I don't know how much it was. He said he needs 3 dances before he leaves. So I went to the dance section and got myself 3 dances. It was getting late, so I wanted to get out of there, but of course I needed to say thanks and goodbye to the customer. I spotted him being escorted out of the club by a bouncer immediately after I left the dance area. Apparently, he was getting too forward with one of the dancers. I followed them out to the parking lot, and the guy acted like it was a common occurrence for him. He then handed me $60 and said it was for my cab ride home. He drove off in his new vehicle, and I haven't heard from him since, so basically, I got paid to sell a guy a vehicle with women at every turn. Story 41. I worked in defense contracting. They didn't pay us for the drive to the airport, unless it was really far if I remember correctly. I was close, so no idea. But they paid us the entire travel duration afterwards until our final destination. I would wake up Monday morning, drive 30 minutes to the airport, and get paid starting then and for 8 hours until I made it to my hotel. It was something like a 4-hour plane ride and a 4-hour drive plus meals. I would then work Tuesday to Thursday for 8 to 9 hours and fly home Friday. They paid for all meals and incidentals, of course. Then I'd have to go back next week. There was no option to stay over the weekend. Couldn't believe they were paying us 2 full days of travel per week to the same site. And this went on for months. Also, everyone had separate hotels, separate flights, and separate cars all going to the same location. Story 42. Worked retail and had to sticker hundreds of items of clothing with little black sale stickers. And just as I'm finishing up, I was told they changed their mind and wanted me to use red stickers instead. So I went back over every item with red stickers. It was also a public holiday in Australia, so I was paid 2.5 times my average pay and spent 6 hours of my shift doing just that. Story 43. Expos. They bought my department first-class high-speed train tickets to get there, paid for all food, rooms, etc., and let us wander around and see all the technology and innovations. Every customer or supplier of ours waved us into their booth, gave us beer, food, and free swag. After the expo, there was a company party on the expo floor in our booth, free food, booze, and seeing probably 90% of senior staff of our company completely hammered. Aside from that, as a recent grad who had previously only had temp and part-time jobs, I'm still amazed I have paid vacation, and a lot of it at that. And if you liked any of these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.